Every time Chinese warplanes roar over the Taiwan Strait, the world holds its breath. But while all eyes fixate on Taiwan, a second flashpoint is rapidly escalating just south, one that could drag the region into dangerous uncharted waters in the South China Sea. China has gone berserk, claiming territories it once diplomatically accepted were never its to begin with. As the threat of war looms larger, under Xi Jinping, Beijing is tightening its grip on this vital maritime artery, laying sweeping claims over waters and territories that legally belong to its neighbors. The Philippines, backed by the United States, now finds itself in the direct path of China's maritime ambitions, with tensions boiling over at the second Thomas Shoal in the Spratly Islands, where even a sandbar has become a symbol of sovereignty and survival. So the question looms large: can the Philippines and its allies afford to back down without setting a precedent for unchecked aggression in Asia's most volatile sea? Or are we witnessing the opening moves of a broader conflict that could reshape the Indo-Pacific balance forever? The South China Sea is no longer just a body of water. It's a geoeconomic lottery ticket, brimming with untapped oil, natural gas, and national pride. It's no wonder that Beijing has laid sweeping, near-total claims over it, infuriating neighbors like the Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, and even distant powers like Indonesia and Brunei. Since the 1970s, these countries have staked claims to islands and reefs like the Spratlys, yet China's aggressive land reclamation and militarization have rapidly outpaced diplomacy. Tensions in the South China Sea have boiled over into outright confrontations as China and the Philippines now find themselves locked in a dangerous tit-for-tat escalation over reefs, sandbars, and sovereignty. In one of the most alarming developments yet, Chinese Coast Guard officers landed on Sandy Cay, a speck of sand less than 200 kilometers from the Philippine coast, and raised their national flag in what Beijing called a display of sovereign jurisdiction.
铁线礁是中国南沙群岛的一部分，是无人岛礁。中方依法开展维权执法活动，旨在反制菲律宾方面非法登礁等侵权挑衅活动，坚定维护国家领土主权，确保铁线礁维持无人无设施状态，坚定维护南海各方行为宣言的。
There is no truth whatsoever to the claim of the Chinese Coast Guard that the Pag-asa case has been seized. No? The facts on the ground do not support this statement coming from the Philippine Chinese Coast Guard. They have urged the People's Republic of China and the Chinese Coast Guard to act with restraint and not increase tensions in the West Philippine Sea. We remind them of their commitment in the 2002 Declaration of Conduct, wherein it was agreed by those nations that signed the Declaration of Conduct that there will be no occupation moving forward of unoccupied features. We also ask them to stop all provocative activities in the West Philippine Sea, to uphold international law, and to help reduce tensions in the West Philippine Sea at this time.
The Philippines responded swiftly, deploying personnel and unfurling its own flag, sparking outrage from China, which condemned the act as illegal boarding. These theatrics, while seemingly symbolic, are rapidly becoming a flashpoint that could ignite something far more serious. How long can these flag wars continue before someone fires a real shot? And will the United States honor its defense treaty if war breaks out over a sliver of sand? This standoff came mere days after joint US-Philippines military drills, which China decried as a destabilizing provocation. Meanwhile, both nations have flooded the disputed waters with Coast Guard and militia vessels while still claiming innocence and restraint. But the strategy is clear: test the red lines. To see who blinks first. Chinese vessels have rammed Philippine ships. blasted them with high-powered water cannons, and even fired military-grade lasers, temporarily blinding crew members. These aren't isolated incidents. They're part of a chilling pattern of intimidation. Just last year, a Philippine ship near Sabina Shoal was deliberately rammed in broad daylight, and at Second Thomas Shoal, where Manila grounded the BRP Sierra Madre to enforce its territorial claims, China continues to block supply missions and surround the area with hostile ships. Will China's brazen use of force and the Philippines' increasingly assertive response push Southeast Asia into an armed conflict, dragging in the US and Japan? Under President Ferdinand Marcos Jr., the Philippines has abandoned its former appeasement policy and doubled down on alliances. The US has expanded base access, confirmed that the Mutual Defense Treaty applies to these contested waters, and Japan is now supplying military assets to Manila and Hanoi. The South China Sea has become the epicenter of a 21st century struggle over sovereignty, resources, and power, and one miscalculation could spark a war none of these nations can afford. On April 29, 2025, the South China Sea became a live theater of geopolitical brinkmanship as China launched what it called a routine naval and air patrol, just as more than 14,000 US and Filipino troops engaged in the most intense joint war games the region has seen set in recent history. According to China's Southern Theater Command, the Philippines is guilty of inciting maritime provocations and dragging in outside powers, namely the US, to escalate tensions. In a fiery statement, Beijing accused Manila of disturbing the peace and vowed to resolutely defend its claimed maritime sovereignty. Meanwhile, in a stunning display of force, US B-1B bombers, F-16S, and Philippine F-A-50 jets flew coordinated patrols over the disputed waters, making it clear that the alliance between Washington and Manila is no paper tiger. The Philippine military responded to China's accusations by firmly declaring its sovereign right to patrol and defend its exclusive economic zone, EEZ, and partner with any nation that shares its democratic values. Preparedness is not provocation, it insisted, but make no mistake, this is no longer just a standoff over sea rocks and sandbars. With strategic bombers and combat aircraft now sharing the skies with rival fleets, the South China Sea is becoming a volatile flashpoint where one misstep, one collision, or one rogue missile could unleash a regional war that pulls in the world's superpowers.
Ultimately want is for other countries to concede by putting pressure, by harassing, by wearing down the opponent.
This is Chinese Naval Warship 552. You are violating China's territorial airspace. Leave now. Leave immediately.
What the Chinese is doing this is they are actually jeopardizing the global order that we all enjoy. And that is what is at stake.
As the obsession of warmongering heightens for both the USA and China, utilizing global proxies as a reminiscence of the Cold War tactics, it is important to think, when do routine drills and joint patrols cross the threshold into acts of war? And who gets to decide? Are we prepared for what happens when diplomacy fails and warships do the talking? If the Philippines continues to assert its legal maritime rights, how far will China go to protect its self-declared, indisputable sovereignty? And just as crucially, how much longer can regional peace survive the strain of unchecked militarization and confrontational alliances? The next chapter in this standoff won't just define borders. It could redefine the balance of power in the Indo-Pacific, or worse, plunge it into open war. The South China Sea isn't just heating up, it's nearing a boil. The question is, who will turn down the flame? If anyone.